The request printed at 3 in the morning. I heard the dot matrix catch before I saw it, that staggered, mechanical stutter the old supply printer makes when it receives a valid requisition from the floor system. I was sitting at the materials desk in the basement distribution hub, halfway through a restock count on surgical drapes, and I watched the paper feed through with the calm expectation that it was a late ad from one of the active wards. Nights generate maybe 4 or 5 unscheduled requests between midnight and 6. It's normal. I tore the sheet off and read it under the desk lamp. 1 pediatric fitted sheet, 1 flat sheet, 2 thermal blankets, 1 pediatric gown size small. Requisition number valid. Timestamp current 03/00/07. Inventory numbers matching active stock. Delivery barcode accepted. Pricing current to our fiscal quarter. Requesting location. Wing C4, room C417. I set the paper down and looked at it for probably 10 seconds without moving. Wing C4 has been closed for 8 months. Major water intrusion from a roof failure during a January storm, followed by electrical contamination on 2 of the 3 subpanels. No patients, no nursing staff, no active supply terminal, no linen allocation, utilities disconnected except emergency egress lighting, fire doors locked. Access restricted to facilities and emergency logistics staff with approved clearance. Room C417 doesn't exist in our active bed management system. It was removed from census 8 months ago when the wing closed, and the request was pediatric. I picked up the house phone and paged Lee Morgan, the night nursing supervisor. While I waited for her to call back, I pulled up the supply terminal and queried the requisition. It was there. Logged, numbered, routed, priced. The system had accepted it as though it came from a working terminal on a staffed ward. The phone rang. Materials, this is Lee. It's Marcus. I just got a supply pull from C4. She was quiet for a moment. C4 is closed. I know. Requisition is valid. Pediatric linen set for room 417. There's no terminal in C4. There's no power to the terminal bays. I'm looking at the printout. It's got a current timestamp and a good delivery barcode. System error, she said. Has to be. Can you void it? I could have. That would have been the clean procedural answer: void the requisition, log it as a routing fault, flag it for IT review in the morning. I almost did, but something about the supply list stopped me. 1 fitted sheet, 1 flat, 2 warming blankets, 1 gown. That's not random. That's a specific pediatric bedding change, the kind you'd pull for a child who's cold, who's been lying in wet linen, who needs warming and a clean gown. I'd done that exact pull 3 hours earlier. For a real patient. Lee, is Daniel Ray's still in Fort Welve? Another pause. The surgical ped's kid should be. Why? I brought him blankets around midnight. His IV line was leaking at the connector and his bedding was damp. He was shivering. I flagged it for the floor nurse, but it was just me and Sandra covering supply runs, and the floor was short 2 aides. Hold on. I heard her typing. His last charted vitals are from 11:40. Nobody's been in since. He's been lying in wet bedding for 4 hours. I'm going up there now, she said. Don't deliver to C4, I'll call you back. I didn't deliver to C4. I pulled the items from the requisition list, the same list, identical quantities, and loaded them onto a clean cart. Then I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked to room 412 myself. Daniel was awake. He was lying on his side with his knees drawn up, and the thin hospital blanket was bunched under his arm. The overhead light was off, but the hallway fluorescence threw enough glow through the open door to see his face. His cheeks were flushed. His forehead was damp. The IV line had been retaped at some point, but the bedding beneath his hip was visibly wet, and the sheet had pulled off one corner of the mattress. Lee arrived 30 seconds after I did. She checked his temperature, 101.4, and his pulse, then looked at me. "Get that sheet off. I'll get him sitting up." We changed his bedding together. I stripped the wet-fitted sheet and replaced it, laid the flat sheet, tucked the 2 warming blankets around him. Lee helped him into a clean gown while I bagged the soiled linen. Daniel didn't say much. He watched us work with that particular expression kids get when they've been waiting long enough to believe no one is coming, but not long enough to stop hoping. When Lee was adjusting his IV line, he looked at me. "Do you know which rooms still have people in them?" "What do you mean?" "Like, does anyone check?" Because I pressed the button a bunch of times and I thought maybe the screen was broken and nobody could see my room anymore. "We can see your room," I said. "You're right here." "Okay." He pulled the warming blanket up to his chin. It just got really cold. Lee and I stepped into the hall. She had her tablet out, updating his chart, and I could see her jaw working the way it does when she's angry and trying not to show it in front of a patient. 4 hours, she said. 9 years old, post-surgical, febrile, lying in wet linen for 4 hours because we don't have the bodies to cover a floor check. I know. I'm going to stay on this floor for the next hour. I'll loop back to him every 20 minutes. I nodded and took the soiled linen bag back to the elevator. When I got to the basement, I looked at the supply printer. The C4 requisition had changed. The itemized list was gone. In its place, where the delivery status field should have read pending or in transit, there were 2 words. Admission interrupted. I stared at it. Then, as I watched, the entire requisition line disappeared from the printer queue. I checked the terminal. The record was gone. No void code, no cancellation, no IT flag. The system had simply released it, the way it does when a delivery is completed and accepted, except no delivery had been made to C4. The supplies were upstairs on Daniel's bed where they belonged. I sat down. I pulled the original printout from the desk where I'd left it and looked at it again. The paper was real. The ink was real. The requisition number was still printed on it, but the system no longer had any record of the request. I folded the printout and put it in my shirt pocket. For about 40 minutes, nothing happened. I finished the surgical drape count. I restocked 2 floor carts for the morning shift. I answered a page from the ER supply closet about saline flush kits. Normal work. I was almost willing to file the C4 requisition under system glitch and let it sort it out in the morning. At 3:47 a.m., the printer stuttered again. This time the request was for adult incontinence supplies. 2 pads, 1 fitted brief, 1 barrier cream, 1 set of bed protectors. Requesting location, Wing C4, Room C409. Valid requisition. Current timestamp. Good barcode. Current pricing. I called Lee. Another one from C4. Adult incontinence supplies this time. Room 409. She didn't say system error this time. She was quiet for several seconds. What floor are incontinence supplies most commonly needed on right now? 3rd floor has the most long-term care beds. 2nd floor MedSurg has a few. Check census. Any patient flagged for a continence care plan who hasn't been attended in the last 4 hours. I pulled the census terminal and filtered for it. Took me less than a minute. Helen Parr, room 214. Continence care was due at midnight. No charted completion. I'll get someone there now. Lee dispatched an aide to room 214. 11 minutes later, while I was still sitting at the desk, the C4 requisition for room 409 disappeared. Same way as before. No void, no cancel. Just gone as though the delivery had been accepted, except nothing had been delivered to C4. The supplies had never left the shelf. The only thing that had changed was that a living patient on the second floor had received the care she'd been waiting for. I pulled the printout from the printer tray before the digital record could vanish. I put it with the first one. 2 requests from 2 closed-wing rooms. 2 living patients whose care had fallen through the cracks on a short-staffed night. Both times, the supply list matched the unmet need exactly. Both times, the request disappeared when the real patient received attention. I didn't have a theory. I had a pattern. Lee called me back at 4:16 a.m. "Marcus, how long have you worked nights in this hospital?" 11 years. "You ever heard of C4 doing this before?" "No, but C4 has only been closed 8 months. "Right." She paused. I pulled the supply logs for the last 8 months. There are 6 voided requisitions from C4 terminals, all flagged as routing errors, all during overnight shifts, all voided by supply techs without investigation. Nobody checked the patients. Nobody knew to check the patients. They voided the glitch and moved on. That's procedure. Do the voided requests correspond to any incident reports? Falls, missed care, condition changes. I heard her typing. Then she stopped. 2 of them correspond to rapid response calls within 90 minutes of the voided supply request. One was a fall. One was a hypothermia flag on an elderly patient whose warming blankets had been requested in the voided order. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The basement was quiet. The printer was quiet. The fluorescent tube above the desk hummed at its constant 60-cycle pitch, and I could hear Lee breathing on the other end of the line. "I'm going to keep watching the printer," I said. "I'm going to keep checking the floors." At 4:31 a.m., the printer produced a third requisition from Wing C4. 1 pediatric fitted sheet, 2 thermal blankets, 1 warming pack, 1 pediatric gown, size small. Room C417. Daniel Reyes. This time the requisition included something the first one hadn't. Beneath the standard supply list, in the delivery notes field where nurses sometimes type special instructions, there was a line I had never seen generated by our system. Bed assignment. Transfer pending. RM 412 right arrow RMC 417. That was when I understood. The first request had not simply identified a need and moved on. It had selected a patient. We had interrupted the admission. We had not ended it. I pulled up the bed management terminal. Daniel's active assignment was room 412. I refreshed the screen. Room 412. I refreshed again. For a half second, maybe less, the field read C417 before it corrected back to 412. I called Lee. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she'd been holding the phone. Another pediatric pull for C417. Same list. And the delivery notes say transfer pending room 412 to C417. That's not possible. I have to authorize bed transfers. I haven't authorized anything. I watched the bed management screen. His assignment flickered. It showed C417 for a fraction of a second before it went back. "I'm going to his room right now." "Lee, is he okay?" "I checked him 20 minutes ago. He was drowsy but responsive. Fever was down to 108. He was warm." "Check him again. I'm coming up." "No," she said, and her voice was harder than I'd heard it all night. "You're not going up. You're going to C4. "What?" "If the pattern holds, the request disappears when the patient gets care. I'm going to Daniel's room and I'm going to stay with him." I need you to go to C4 and find out what room 417 looks like right now. Because if that wing is preparing to receive a 9-year-old surgical patient, I need to know." She was right. I knew she was right, and I knew it the way you know something is right when every part of your training tells you to do the opposite. My job is supply management. I count things. I route things. I make sure the right items reach the right rooms. I moved out of patient care 11 years ago because I was afraid of what happened when I had to make a decision that couldn't be measured or counted. A judgment call about a person, not an object. Supply work felt safe. The inventory doesn't ask you to be brave. The barcode scanner doesn't care if you're afraid. I took the requisition printout. I took a flashlight. I took my access badge, which has facilities clearance for restricted areas during overnight emergencies. I did not take a cart. I did not load the supplies. The fire doors to Wing C4 are on the 4th floor, at the far end of the east corridor, past the active nursing station. At that hour the station was unmanned. The floor nurse was doing rounds on the opposite end. The corridor was lit but empty. The fire doors were closed and latched with a magnetic lock. My badge activated the lock. The light turned green. The door opened. C4 looked like a closed hospital wing. That's all. The emergency egress lights were on, casting that flat gray-green wash that makes everything look like it's underwater. The floor was clean but dusty in the way floors get when nobody walks on them for months. The ceiling tiles were intact in this section, though I could see staining further down where the water damage had been worst. The air was cool and still, and smelled faintly of drywall compound and old adhesive. Rooms on either side had their doors propped open with rubber wedges, and I could see stripped beds, stacked chairs, coiled IV poles. It was not frightening. It was a construction zone that nobody had gotten around to finishing. I walked to room 417. The door was closed. Not locked, closed, the way an active patient room is closed when someone is resting inside. I pushed it open. The emergency egress lights were on in this room too, but they were brighter than the hallway. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed the difference, the way you notice when a room is set to comfort lighting instead of full overheads. The room was set up. A pediatric bed, fully made, fitted sheet pulled tight, flat sheet folded down at the chest line. 2 thermal blankets folded neatly at the foot. A pediatric gown, size small, laid out on the pillow. I had not brought a cart. C4 had no linen allocation, no active storage, and no one had delivered anything through those fire doors. But every item from the requisition was already waiting in the room. The mattress wasn't the stripped institutional pad I'd seen in every other room on the wing. It was dressed. It was ready. I put my hand on the mattress. It was warm. Not the warmth of a heating pad or a mechanical warmer, warmer than the room, warmer than it should have been. The kind of warmth a body leaves when it gets up to use the bathroom and you touch the sheets before they cool. Except nobody had gotten up. Nobody was here. The room had been empty for 8 months and the bed was warm. At the head of the bed, the bedside patient status display was active. It should not have been. The wing's terminal network was disconnected, but the small screen showed a pulse rate and a temperature. Pulse, 94. Temperature, 100. 6. Those were Daniel's numbers. I'd seen Lee chart them 40 minutes ago. The screen was showing a live feed of a patient 2 wings and 1 floor away, as though he were lying right here. As I watched, the pulse reading ticked to 96, then settled back to 93. Real time, updating. I backed out of the room and called Lee. "I'm in C4. Room 417 is set up for a patient. Bed is made, warming blankets, gown. The mattress is warm. The bedside monitor is showing Daniel's vitals in real time. He's in his room, she said immediately. I'm standing next to his bed. He's asleep. He's here. What's his pulse right now? A pause, 93. I looked at the screen in C417, 93. It's mirroring him. Marcus, check the bed management board. Tell me what it says. I pulled out my phone and accessed the hospital's bed management portal through the staff app. I navigated to Daniel's patient ID. The assignment field was cycling. Room 412. Room C417. Room 412. Room C417. Each change lasted about 2 seconds. His name, his patient ID, his admission status, all of it alternating between two locations, as though the system couldn't decide which room he was in, or as though one room was pulling him away from the other. It's flickering between the two rooms, I said, about every 2 seconds. What's his admission status on the C4 side? I waited for the field to cycle to C417 and read it. Admission in progress, and on the Fort Wells side, transfer pending. The phone line was quiet except for the soft beeping of Daniel's cardiac monitor in the background, audible through Lee's end. The same rhythm I could see on the screen 6 inches from my face, in a room that had been closed for 8 months. Lee, if this follows the same pattern, the request should disappear when Daniel is receiving active care. You said you're with him. I'm with him. I've been with him. I updated his chart. I checked his IV. I adjusted his blankets 10 minutes ago. Then why hasn't the request canceled? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter, more careful. Because proximity isn't enough this time. The first time when we changed his bedding and warmed him up and physically attended to him, that interrupted it. But now the room is ready. The bed is made. The monitor is synced. It's not waiting for him to be neglected anymore. It's already preparing the admission. Being present in his room might not be enough to cancel a transfer that's already in progress. Then what cancels it? You're standing in the room that's trying to admit him, Marcus. What do you think cancels it? I understood what she was telling me. I understood it with a clarity that felt physical, like the moment in patient care when you realize the thing you've been monitoring has changed and now you have to act. Not document, not flag, not route to the appropriate department. Act. The room was ready. The bed was made. The system was processing an admission. If the admission completed, if the prepared room was accepted as a valid destination and the transfer went through, I didn't know what would happen to Daniel. I didn't know if he'd code, or if his bed upstairs would simply show empty, or if his records would update to reflect a room that didn't exist on any active floor plan. I didn't know, and I was not going to find out. I set the phone on the bedside table with Lee still on the line. I picked up the pediatric gown from the pillow and dropped it on the floor outside the room. I picked up both warming blankets from the foot of the bed and threw them into the hallway. I pulled the flat sheet off the mattress and balled it up and tossed it through the doorway. Then I grabbed the corner of the fitted sheet. The printer on the wall, a small supply confirmation terminal I hadn't noticed until that moment because it shouldn't have been active, began printing. I heard the stutter. I looked over. It was reissuing the requisition. 1 pediatric fitted sheet, 1 flat sheet, 2 thermal blankets, 1 pediatric gown. Room C417. Complete immediately, I tore the printout off the terminal and crumpled it. I pulled the fitted sheet from the first corner. The elastic fought me tight, tighter than I'd pulled a fitted sheet in years, tighter than any sheet I'd ever dressed a bed with in 11 years of hospital work. I got the first corner free and moved to the second. The terminal printed again. Same requisition, same items, same room. Complete immediately, I ignored it and yanked the second corner free. The mattress beneath was warm, warmer now than when I'd first touched it, and the depression I'd noticed was deeper. A shallow, body-length impression in the surface of the pad, the size and shape of a small child lying on his side with his knees drawn up. The same position Daniel had been lying in when I found him in room 412. On the bedside screen, the pulse reading was climbing. 96, 99, 102. I picked up the phone. Lee, what's his heart rate? Climbing 9800. He's restless, Marcus. He's waking up. He looks scared. Keep him awake. Keep your hands on him. Talk to him. Don't let him fall back asleep. What's happening in the room? I'm stopping it. I pulled the third corner of the fitted sheet. The terminal printed a third time. I didn't read it. The sheet came free at the third corner with a sound like adhesive separating, and the depression in the mattress shifted, not deepened, shifted, as though something beneath the surface was adjusting its position. There was nothing beneath the surface. It was a foam pad on a metal frame. I could see the edges. I could see the underside through the bed rail. There was nothing there. I pulled the fourth corner. The sheet came off. I held it in both hands, standing in the gray-green light of a room that had been closed for 8 months. The terminal behind me was printing continuously now, the same requisition over and over, the paper feeding through in a long, unbroken scroll of identical requests. 1 fitted sheet, 2 blankets, 1 gown, complete immediately, complete immediately, complete immediately. I carried the sheet to the hallway and dropped it on the pile with the rest of the linen. I went back into the room. The bedside screen was still cycling, but the numbers were falling. 94, 91, 88. The mattress depression was shallowing. The warmth was fading. I could feel it receding under my palm like a cooling engine. The terminal had stopped printing. Lee. He's settling. Heart rate's coming down. He's looking at me. He asked me if I was going to stay. What did you tell him? I told him yes. I looked at the bedside screen. The cycling had stopped. The display showed room C417 for one more moment, then it went dark. Not off, not aerostate, just dark. The screen of a terminal with no network connection and no power supply, which is what it should have been all along. I pulled out my phone and checked the bed management portal. Daniel Ray's, room 412. Care restored. The requisition queue for wing C4 was empty. I picked up every piece of linen from the hallway floor. I carried it out of C4, through the fire doors and back to the active wing. I didn't leave it. I didn't leave anything in that room that could dress a bed. I brought the linen back to the basement and logged it as returned to general stock. I pulled up the C4 supply history on the terminal. Every requisition from that night, all 3, was gone. Not voided, not canceled. Gone as though they'd never been issued. The only proof they'd existed was the crumpled printouts in my shirt pocket and the continuous scroll of complete immediately requests I'd torn off the wall terminal in room 417. Lee stayed with Daniel until the morning shift arrived. She charted his vitals every 15 minutes. She changed his IV bag. She kept the lights at comfort level, and she stayed in the room. When the day shift charge nurse arrived at 7, Lee briefed her on Daniel's night, fever, wet bedding, IV leak, delayed care, and made sure he was on the priority rounding list for the morning. She didn't mention C4. Neither did I, not to the day shift. We met in the cafeteria at 7:30, after handoff. She had 2 coffees and a look on her face that I recognized from my years as an orderly. The expression of someone who has handled something they have no framework for and is now trying to decide what framework to build. I went back through the voided requisitions, she said. The 6 from the last 8 months. I cross-referenced them against the nursing incident logs. And 4 of the 6 correspond to documented care delays. 2 of those 4 escalated. 1 patient was transferred to the ICU within 12 hours of the voided request. 1 patient, an 82-year-old man, coded the following night. The request was voided as a routing error. The request was voided as a routing error, because that's what it looks like. That's what I would have done if you hadn't called me tonight. I drank my coffee. Hospital cafeteria coffee at 7:30 in the morning after a 12-hour overnight. It tasted exactly like that. I don't know what C4 is doing, I said. I don't know if it's the building or the system or something in the electrical that the water damage exposed. I don't have a theory. I have a pattern. The pattern is that it identifies patients who aren't being cared for. Yes. And it prepares to receive them. Yes. And if the care is provided, the request goes away. Yes. Lee set her coffee down. Then we don't need a theory, we need a protocol. We wrote it that morning. It wasn't formal. It wouldn't survive an administrative review, and we both knew that. But between the two of us, we had enough influence over the overnight workflow to make it stick. The protocol was simple. Any supply requisition originating from Wing C4 triggers an immediate bedside welfare check on all patients with overdue care tasks. No supplies are delivered to C4. No carts are routed to the closed wing. The request is treated as a flag, not a delivery order. Find the patient. Meet the need. The request cancels itself. We didn't explain why. We framed it as a systems monitoring initiative tied to the known electrical issues in the closed wing. The overnight supply techs accepted it because it gave them a clear instruction. The night nurses accepted it because Lee told them to. Over the following 3 months, C4 issued 11 requisitions, all overnight, all between 1 and 4 in the morning, all valid in format, all impossible in origin. Every single one corresponded to a living patient on an active floor whose care had been delayed. A warming blanket for a hypothermic post-op patient on the 3rd floor. Incontinence supplies for a patient on the 2nd floor whose aide had called in sick. A fresh gown and bedding change for a woman on the 5th floor who had been vomiting and whose call light had been on for 45 minutes without response. Every time, someone got to the patient. Every time, the C4 request disappeared. We never delivered to the closed wing. We never had to enter room C417 again. And I never found out what would have happened if the delivery had been completed. If the bed had stayed made, the gown laid out, the monitor synced, and nobody had intervened. I don't know if the patient would have died, or disappeared, or simply been transferred into a room that the hospital would have quietly absorbed into its census the way it absorbs everything else. I don't know if C4 was trying to rescue the patients it flagged or trying to take them. I don't know if there's a difference in a building where a closed wing cares more about a 9-year-old boy's wet bedding than the staffing system that's supposed to keep him safe. What I know is this. I spent 11 years in supply management because I believed that staying inside my role was the same as doing no harm. I counted inventory. I loaded carts. I routed deliveries. I kept my hands on objects instead of people, because objects don't ask you to make choices that keep you up at night. I moved out of patient care because I was afraid, not of patients, but of the weight of being the last person between someone and something going wrong. And then a closed wing printed a supply request for a child who was cold and alone, and I discovered that the objects were asking me to make the choice anyway. I work patient floors again now. Not full-time, I'm still in materials management, still doing overnight supply runs. But when I deliver to a room, I check the patient. When a call light is on and the hallway is empty, I answer it. I am not a nurse. I am not qualified to provide clinical care, but I can change a sheet. I can bring a blanket. I can tell a 9-year-old boy that someone knows he's there. Daniel went home 6 days after the surgery. Lee made sure of that personally. I don't know if he remembers the night his bedding was wet and nobody came for 4 hours. I hope he doesn't. I hope he remembers that someone eventually did. The last request from C4 printed at exactly 3 in the morning. 1 sheet, 1 blanket, 1 adult gown. I never took the cart downstairs. I found the patient first. The order disappeared when someone answered her call light.